Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Sir Tegh Gill, and thank you today for joining us annual flagship event, the Tegh Talks Gala. This event brings together speakers from around the world so that we can celebrate the rich history of Sikhs in Canada and beyond, be inspired by their successes, and motivate young Sikhs to make their mark. Sikh Heritage Month was initially passed into law in Ontario with the passing of Bill 52. This marked the first official celebration of Sikh heritage in the world. The Government of Canada officially designated April as Sikh Heritage Month across the country in 2019 with the passing of Bill C-376. The flagship event of every Sikh Heritage Month Ottawa is the annual Tegh Talks Gala. Each year, Sikh speakers from around the world converge in Ottawa so that we can celebrate their achievements and be inspired by their successes. As planning of this year's gala started during a period of pandemic-induced uncertainty, we were unable to meet in person, but this has allowed us to make the whole world the stage of Tegh Talks 2022. Today, we are joined by 4 amazing speakers who are here to talk about their path through life and the obstacles they faced along the way. After each speaker, we will have some time to answer a few audience questions, so feel free to put them in the Q&A panel. I will now pass on the mic to my co-host, Snehpal Sandhu.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Our first speaker tonight is Dr. Baljit Singh. Dr. Singh is a highly accomplished researcher, educator, and administrator in the field of veterinary medicine, and with specific expertise in lung biology and anatomy. He began his role as Vice President of Research at the University of Saskatchewan in 2021, after serving as the Dean of the University of Calgary Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, and serving as the Associate Dean of Research at the Western College of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Saskatchewan. Dr. Singh received his bachelor and master's in veterinary science from Punjab Agricultural University before completing his PhD from the University of Guelph. He has won many national and international awards for his teaching and research, and we are all very lucky to have him speak here today. And with that, we would like to welcome our first speaker, Dr. Baljit Singh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. And thank you very much, Snehpal, for the introduction, and it has been a pleasure to meet with Tegh, speak with him this week, and my heart fills with optimism and joy when I see young Sikh women and men like yourselves leading the way in the community, and that really tells me that the future is nothing but bright, not only for the community but also for our country, which we so lovingly want to see prosper. And I also feel very honored to be in the presence of Dr. Anand, Lieutenant Colonel Kalsi, and Dr. Grewal, to be included with them in this year's Tegh Talks. They are amazing leaders in their fields. The challenges they have overcome, the contribution they have made, and the career they have developed for themselves is truly an inspiration for me and for everyone else, irrespective of which religious, cultural background they may come from. I'm always perplexed when somebody asks me to speak at an event like this, because normally if I have to have some people listen to me, I have to buy them cake, coffee, donuts. Even then, I can't generate an audience most of the time. So an event like this, I always wonder, what is it that I can share with a group of people, and so I really begin that process quite a bit early. So I will take some time to go through some aspects and then leave enough time for questions and answers. I would even pause here for a few seconds if there is something specifically that audience would like me to address. I'm always very open to that. So please feel free to pass your question to Tegh or Snehpal or post it. I believe I can see the chat and question and answers. So if there's anything right uppermost in your mind, please put it in the chat. While you are doing that, as Snehpal said, I grew up in Punjab and came to Canada in '89. My early childhood grew up in a rural setting, and that's where we learn the value of the work ethic, because every growing up young boy and girl is doing work. They go to school, they help with the family chores. I come from an cultural family, and so that was part of the growth and upbringing. But I knew from very early on, my parents, my father was a high school teacher. My mother did not have much of an opportunity to go to school. I knew that the education is the way forward. So that was very clear right from the get-go. So finishing high school, going to college, and then biggest break in life came being admitted to veterinary medicine program at Punjab Agricultural University. Now you have to picture, many of you may know, or your families may know, Punjab Agricultural University is this institution that has revolutionized a way of living in Punjab, really uplifting hundreds and thousands of families to a different way of living their lives through education, through prosperity. And that was the reason hundreds and thousands of young kids like myself were able to go to universities and colleges, because their parents were able to support to do that because of the contributions of the PAU. So that's where the role of the institutions becomes paramount if the communities are going to progress and going to have meaningful lives and be able to push back against insidious philosophies like intolerance, racism, conspiracy theories. It all begins with the universities and colleges and high schools. So the role of the teachers and professors is very critical in our society. And there it was a very modern university, just a land grant university, really modern university. You walk onto the campus of PAU in those days, it was a different world. To get a world-class education in that university, and I was very active in theater and dance, and I was a student leader. One of the highlight of those days was I led one of the longest student strike on campus, up to 33 days, I remember, and everybody lost a semester. So that was a leadership experience as a student in those days. And then the Canada, US, and ended up becoming a professor. And so that's a bit of a story which Snehpal has spoken about. The most critical events. First, I really want to talk about the family. So parents really help us a lot. I have a younger brother, Harjeet Singh Gill. He lives in Surrey, BC. He's a very popular radio show host, and I think he's fairly well known in the Sikh community. He is an engineer, but he did not pursue that path, and he's there. The most critical event in our lives, the event that really makes a big change, is finding a life partner in our life. And so my wife, Sarbjit Kaur, I mean, she's also listening today. She's on the Zoom. Sarbjit Kaur Gill. That was one of the biggest transformational event for me when we got married, and in '99. She's a teacher, a science degree and an education degree. She studied for 2.5 years at the University of Saskatchewan, and she taught Montessori school in Saskatoon. She is the pillar, the force, and when you come home, then the family piece. And that's where it all becomes meaningful. Your inspiration, your ability to go through challenges of life, and then growing a family together. Sarbjit and I have one child, Bahul Singh, and he is in grade 12. He's going to go to biomedical sciences in Nepal, as you are doing. And he wears a turban in your style, a round turban, and he's an Amritdhari Sikh. So he's a fearless debater, and nationally, internationally ranked Rubik cube solver, and so that's the family, right? So that's where it all becomes meaningful. And Sikhism, the role of grist, finding a partner, and really sharing a life together, and growing in spirituality, and going together with the struggle and the joys of the life, and really raising a next generation, that's your children, and going from there. So that's the family piece, because that is very critical part of the story of our growth, and it leads us towards values of Sikhism, and we go from there. I wonder if there's any pressing question in the minds of the audience at this point, if they would like me to speak to. I can pivot at any time. Otherwise, I'm a professor. I speak in 45-minute long stretches. So
there is one question in the chat if you wanted to answer that really quickly.
Sure.
What kind of adversity did you face in becoming a veterinarian in Canada, especially as a Sikh?
Yes, it will come in a minute. And thank you for that question. I will certainly talk about that. So when we think about challenges in life, what are challenges? Challenges that we can't see our way through a situation in which we are stuck. It could be of our own making. It could be of the making of the society. It could be coming at us from intolerance, a lack of understanding of the environment, about our values. And it could be economic, could be social, could be family. So quite often the challenge is simply a situation which we have not found a solution yet. And so how do we find a solution to a problem? And whether it's a community problem. When I came to Canada in 89, the biggest thing was, will RCMP allow Sikhs to wear a turban? Sardar Baltej Singh Dhillon was going through that process. There was a member of parliament in Calgary who was generating signatures, 40,000, I believe, against that allowing the turbans in the RCMP. And where is that member of parliament today? These people get mixed up with the dust of the history while turbans flourish everywhere. So the Sikh community at that point found a solution to that problem in many ways, and eventually we came through that. So problems could be at the community level, at the individual level. Problem or the challenge is simply we haven't found a solution to it yet. And as human beings, especially as value-driven a community as Sikhs, it is absolutely easier for us to find a solution to any challenge, whether it was Sikhs landing here 150 years ago, or the Komagata Maru, or fight against colonialism. We have always found a solution to a challenge. So my challenges in the grand scheme of things are minuscule, and people who know me, they will be even hard pressed for me to see me using the word challenge, that I had a challenge in my life. So my mindset is built that way. So these are simply situations, we work through them, and then we find a solution, not only for ourselves, but for others as well at the same time. And coming to the question of finding my career in Canada, I never wanted to be a practicing veterinarian. My heart was in the academy, in doing research, doing teaching, and being a professor. But I always knew that is a very hard, tough goal. I knew my weaknesses, my deficiencies. I come from a village. I did not go to any elite school. And my communication skills possibly still are not up to snuff. And then in a different culture, no mentorship, not very few role models. And so I said, as a fallback option, I need to get my veterinarian's credentials. So while doing PhD, at the same time, I pursued that path. And I was able to complete my theory exams, my practical exams. I still remember a professor who took one of my exams. He just failed me, and I still believe I am the last person to be ascribing a reason to my failure, that it was racism or discrimination. I never do that, because it's very difficult to pinpoint it. I generally say, I'm going to work harder and get through it. I think that was the guy who failed me exactly. I think he did not like people like me. But eventually, I took a second attempt, passed my exam, got my credentials. Then the life takes you to places. Not only I sat on the National Examining Board for Veterinary Medicine in Canada, which is the body that sets up the policies, guidelines, and does the process for licensing graduates of the veterinary schools not accredited by the Canadian and American accrediting body. I also was the member of the same accrediting body that accredits the veterinary colleges in Canada, US, UK, anywhere in the world. Whosoever may request that body to be accredited, so that the graduates of those colleges don't have to write additional set of examinations to become qualified in Canada. So once we apply our mind to something, not only we get our credentials, but eventually I even was member of the Education Commission for Foreign Veterinary Graduates in the US that does the licensing policies for the foreign graduates in the state. So those two bodies, and then finally the accrediting body for the veterinary programs internationally. So that was a very interesting process. So there were challenges, but again, study, hard work, and it just takes us through that. And so that just one example. Veterinary medicine is a very homogeneous profession. It is a land-based profession. Anywhere in the world, the professions of agriculture and veterinary medicine are the last one to change, because humans are connected to land. When that piece changes, it causes massive turbulence in the society. You will see that if you look around, engineering will change very quickly. You're building things, material comes from everywhere, and the engineering was the first one to change. Embrace newcomers. Veterinary medicine and agriculture, you will see still largely homogeneous professions. But it had become very clear early on in my career, people would say, if there's going to be a non-white associate dean or a dean of a veterinary college in Canada, it's going to be Baljeet. So this was very interesting observations made by my mentors, Alistair Summerlee, who was president at University of Guelph, and many of my friends. And I have a wide spectrum of friends from all backgrounds. But they were very clear that if somebody's going to break through this barrier, this ceiling, until I became Associate Dean of Veterinary Medicine at University of Saskatchewan, there was no non-white person ever an Associate Dean. Then eventually I became a Dean. It is the power of the Sikh philosophy that propels us to do these things. It cannot be ascribed to an individual's talent, intellect. That can take us only that far. It is the power of the family, our parents, our wives, our husbands, and that is the Sikh value system that propels us, and we do amazing things which we look back in life said, could I really do that? Then the only answer is that it was the value system. What it does, it keeps us away from arrogance. It keeps us away from the illnesses of too much pride. But it keeps us confident. It keeps us humble, full of humility. That's where it all came from, and it allows us to do seva then. And then it takes us to better places. How do we come about these challenges? So the religious values, Sikh values, the community, the Guru said community, the Sangat. And the Sangat is not only restricted to fellow Sikhs in the Gurdwara Sahib or other organizations. Our Sangat is beyond the Sikhism. Our Sangat is opening our hearts, our minds to any human being in this world. And they are our Sangat. We sit down with them, we share our thoughts, we work together, and through that we learn. The more we open these rooms in which Sangat comes in from anywhere, the better we become, and every challenge becomes very simple way of going through and solving it for everybody. I'm a big believer in meeting people. And Hartek, you would know, I've been talking to my wife and my son about meeting with you, that it was so joyful meeting with Hartek, and that to get to know him. I look forward to get to know more young people in Ottawa and to get to know them. So this gives me biggest joy. I am also a big believer that any meeting with anybody could lead to absolutely unprecedented learning, first, and number two, then other opportunities after that. And I have met people just on the roadside, because you say hello to somebody, then you talk to somebody, then somehow you run into that person over and over again, then a learning begins from that piece. So I believe in random learnings, random accidental meetings with people. And then every meeting is taken in a way with an openness. It's not transactional. It's an open-ended, open-hearted meeting with anybody. And then we go our own ways. So building that Sangat and with the values that we have makes every challenge. People are hard pressed for me to hear me use the word challenge. And so opportunities for growth, for learning, for creating a better community, better society. That's our ultimate goal. That's our ultimate goal at the end of the day, to contribute to that. I have believed in competing for things, not for the sake of competition, sometime now I'm going to leave a couple of things with you in the next 2 minutes, is that competition is great. Sometimes we fail, sometimes we succeed. Quite often I find people to default to a very quick place where we say, I was great, the committee didn't listen to me, there was somebody against me. That does not help us. We cannot change anybody else. We cannot change the committee unless we are very convinced that there's a systemic barrier which goes beyond me. It is interfering with the success and growth of many people. Then we fight that. Otherwise, as individual, we say, no, I need to go back and look, what is it I can do better so that I go at it again. And every goal we set for ourselves is not achievable. I'm not a big fan of saying you can be all you want to be. It's just a warm and fuzzy thing we tell everybody. We can be all we put our hard work into. That's what it is. And then we also need to realize that everybody out there is, God has built like us, equally smart, equally hardworking, and on any given day, anybody can succeed. So that sense of humility and taking the failure with us and going back to a place of spirituality and thinking about that gets us to a better place. So really, if you hear community, which is our family, our sangat, our Sikh values, and then really continue to build in the community. And that's what makes us really better at the end of the day. I will stop here now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. There are a couple of questions in the chat, and I also wanted to ask you a question. You spoke a lot about how finding a life partner and your Sikhi were very important points in your life, and you also spoke about how your Sikh philosophy is what propels you forward in your life. And so I wanted to ask if there are any other instances in your life where you found that your support from your family or from your Sikhi was able to get you through life challenges or life opportunities, as you like to call them.
Right, it's always there. I think, again, let me go to an example. Very early on when I came here, it's very clearly some members in our community told me that with a turban and a beard, there's no chance I'm going to become a professor, especially in veterinary medicine. And I don't network, I don't drink, I don't eat meat, or I don't go networking in the evenings with people. I go, how will I network with anybody if I don't drink beer or a wine or something like that? But I realized later on what a simplistic thinking that was. Our presence, the Sikh mind, it embraces everybody. People come and talk to us when we are standing somewhere, we are trying to help somebody, trying to do something. I think, again, I will give you an example. There was a time when I realized that very likely I will not get a job as a professor. Or there was a time at University of Guelph when I was a student leader there. People are talking about white privilege now. There was a report I was a co-author of in 92, 93 at University of Guelph, which talked about exactly that. The backlash that I felt as a graduate student, very vulnerable graduate student, from the department. They said, what's wrong with you? Are we harassing you? I said, no, it's not about you. It's the systemic barriers which have been created and linked to some values which have nothing to do with your meritocracy. We need to fight against that, which led to the development of first human rights office at University of Guelph. This report is still online. You can find it out. They have a group of 13, 14 people, a Black student, an Asian student, an indigenous student, and we all came together and we forced the university to do that. That was a very tough time. And every day doing part in the morning, evening, listening to Kirtan, talking to other fellow Sikhs. It made, for a moment, I thought my career is done. But I said, I'm a veterinarian. I have my credentials. I can still make my living. If I don't become professor, so be it. But this is a fight that has to be fought. And we did that. And eventually you overcome. So if you really think about it, you never let go of the fight. It's just, you look at it differently. What is we are fighting about? Is it our individual? Is it a systemic? Is it for the community? We need to do our individual battles to succeed as an individual, but we also need to think about, is it going to make a difference to somebody else? The number of Sikh students as applicants to the veterinary school in Calgary began to go up when I was the dean, because people began to see that it is possible. And then I take my role very seriously of working with, I love students, with period. I mean, it's any student can stop me anywhere. But for the Sikh young women and men, my wife and I, we always host one annual dinner at our home. At the end of the academic year, we invite all the students at the university, whosoever wants to come. There's a pizza, there's a simple thing. We sit down, we talk about things. This is my wife, and again, together. There may be 20, maybe 30, maybe 40 students who will come to our home. That's the days, that evening is filled with joy, with laughter, with discussion, with all the great things. And so this is approach, again, a family-driven approach when we work towards that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your answer to that question. And we do have another question in the chat. You've spent a lot of time in Punjab studying and living in Punjab, and you must be aware of the environmental crisis going on in Punjab right now. So some of our audience members are wondering what suggestions you have for the environmental crisis going on there.
Again, thank you. That is a very, very serious matter. The water level in the village where I grew up has gone down from 20 feet in the late 70s, early 80s to about 300 feet now. And the NASA satellite imagery shows that actually it's even lower than that. There is degradation. There's really the amount of vegetation, the trees in my village will be fraction of what they were 40 years ago. But complaining about that does not help. For the last 12 years, I have been running strong programs at Guru Angad Dev Veterinary and Animal Sciences University, which was branched out of the PAU, on programs like infectious disease, food safety, public policy. Right now, we are running a program on gene editing technologies for food security and environmental sustainability. We are about to launch a new program on toxicological assessments in Punjab. So this is through engagement. When we, if there's anybody who's interested in thinking about working there, connecting with the universities, doing a summer program, I invite them to talk to me. We currently have two programs funded by Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, which are in partnership with the Punjab Agricultural University and Guru Angad Dev Veterinary and Animal Sciences University. And I will be happy to connect those students with those programs, and then they can actually go and maybe participate in some other things. The change in the cropping pattern, I'm about to take a call. I don't meet with politicians there in Punjab. I simply meet with academics and students because they are the change agents. I think there is a responsibility to work there. I feel it because I grew up there. Whatever little or big we can do, we should do that. And so that's a very pertinent question, Snehpal. I will encourage anybody to connect with me. I will be very happy to speak with those who are interested. I can happy to take a separate meeting with the students if you would like at any time. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we've got time for just about one more question. Could you tell us maybe a little bit about your work and your research that you're doing in Calgary right now?
So my own research program has been very interesting. It also has been quite an example of resilience in a way. So in PhD program, I began to work on a cell, a macrophage, which is present in the blood vessels in the lungs. And people even suspected whether it's a real cell or it's just a cell which is transiting because of the blood. And over the last, but I stuck with it. As a professor, you are free to do these things. You don't need to worry too much about what others think about what I do. So having supervised about 90 or 100 students, postdoc, PhD, MSc students, at close to 135 research papers. And I think I feel very proud of that work that I have established, the biology of that particular cell and what it does to stimulate inflammatory response in the lung. It was considered to be present only in domestic animals, sheep, pig, horse, cow. But I'm close to clinching the final piece that it may actually be present in the lungs of the humans. And that may affect why certain human beings are more susceptible to lung disease compared to the others. And during my administrative career, 100% of my time is given to my administrative roles, which are very complex. And at University of Saskatchewan, I oversee $330 million worth of research enterprise. There are institutes that made COVID vaccine for Canada. And there's a Canada Synchrotron, there's a Global Food Security Institute. So that's a complex piece, but I never let go of my research program. I still have my own funding from NSERC. I still teach undergraduate program because I love doing that. So research, the lung piece has been central to, if there anybody is interested in doing summer research with me, I can take that student tomorrow to come to Saskatoon and work with me. How about that? And if anybody would like to study respiratory biology, role of macrophages in the lung, innate immunity, and you could talk to me, at least I can take one student tomorrow to have that student fly to Saskatoon and work with me this summer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being so accepting of that. And of course, for anybody who's interested, we can put Dr. Baljeet Singh's email in the chat, and you can reach out to him. And again, I wanted to thank you so much for coming to our Tegh Talks this year. Your story was very inspirational, and I think a lot of the Sikh youth today can take a lot out of it, and even youth of all religions, of all castes, whatever, can take a lot out of the story that you've told today. And I thank you so much for telling that story, and I'll pass it off to Hardik now. Thank you.
Before you do that, thank you very much to both of you. Now, the stories which are going to come now, 3 stories, those are the inspiring stories. I can't wait to hear all 3 of the speakers. Thank you so very much. I will turn my camera off and begin to listen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. Like Snehpal said, it was a very inspirational talk. The next speaker we're going to have tonight is Dr. Kanwaljit Singh Anand. Dr. Anand is currently a professor of pediatrics, anesthesiology, perioperative, and pain medicine at Stanford University School of Medicine. He's also the editor of Journal on Pediatric Research and a world authority on pain management in infants. Dr. Anand graduated from MGM Medical College in Indore and studied at Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar. He's a recipient of the Niels Rosen von Rosenstein Award from the Swedish Academy of Medicine and a Dr. Martin Luther King Salute to Greatness Award from the Governor of Arkansas, among many others. With this, we would like to welcome Dr. Kanwaljit Singh Anand.
Thank you very much, Hardik. It is indeed a great honor and privilege to be part of these talks. And I must say, I was just blown away by the wonderful stories that Dr. Baljeet Singh shared with us. And like him, I cannot wait to hear the other speakers because they're far more accomplished than I am, Dr. Garewal and Dr. Khalsi. But the whole the whole sort of purpose of this is to be able to share our experiences and to be able to figure out what's important in life. What is it that makes life worth living? So I want to ask you, does anyone want to live a long, happy, fulfilling life?
I know I definitely do.
All right, wonderful. Snehpal?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So what is it that makes life worth living? There have been many studies in the medical literature to look at longevity. What is it that makes people live longer, allows people to have less risks of heart disease or stroke or cancer, or what is that the one thing that allows people to do that? And that is, it is the richness, the depth, the quality and the quantity of their social relationships. And this is really important because when Guru Sahib gave us our form and our function as Sikhs, he gave us the Sangat, he gave us the ability to live in Grahast and still attain the divine realization, the self-realization that, he and I are one. But it gave us also this framework, this huge opportunity to be part of a giving, receiving network of people. And so if you look at, a lot of the diseases that affect us as human beings, these are the chronic, long-term, non-communicable diseases, you know about them as well as I do. I don't need to list them. The one thing that is an underlying factor to all of that is stress. Stress causes tension, causes pain, causes emotional upsets, emotional instability. It can cause depression as well. And all of this is activated through, one of the main systems in our body is the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which, causes the release of a stress hormone called cortisol. And then the other stress axis is the sympathoadrenal system, and these two, although they allow us to respond in a crisis, fight or flight response, but most of our lives are really not living through that crisis, that life and death situation. Most of our lives are, traffic, or somebody didn't talk to me well, or I had an argument with my wife or my mother or whoever, in my environment. Those are the chronic, low-grade, frequent stresses that seem to add up and take their toll in terms of causing high blood pressure and, type 2 diabetes and things like that. Of course, lifestyle also matters. But the most potent inhibitor of the HPA axis in our body is oxytocin. Oxytocin is also a hormone which is released in the brain. And how do you release oxytocin? In the past, it was thought, oxytocin is only important for, labor and delivery at the end of pregnancy or for breastfeeding. No. Oxytocin is a very important hormone. And what it does, it's the most potent inhibitor of stress. So what do you do when you're really stressed out? You go and you talk to people. If a friend of yours, if a brother or a sister is hurting really deeply, you go give them a hug. And in giving them a hug, that releases oxytocin. Or you give somebody a pat on the back, or just, be with them, that release, and it immediately lowers down the level of stress that they are feeling. So relationships are very, very important. And that's why, I just admire the work that you're doing, is bringing people together, forming relationships, forming these networks, because this is the lifeline that will allow you to be productive, happy, meaningful lives that you want to live. And so I think that has come through in every situation. Like Dr. Baljit Singh said, it's amazing how in the moment when you have what may be considered a challenge, just the right influences will show up except that you need to be aware of it. You need to be awake enough to spot those opportunities within the crisis. So, and if you treat every opportunity, every crisis as an opportunity for self-growth, for self-perfection, self-mastery, creating that sense of mastery, I can do this, then that becomes your source of progressing and developing in all aspects of your personality, in all aspects. So the other thing that Sikhs are very, very blessed with is this concept of chardi kala. Never ever entertain any self-pity or self sympathy. It doesn't. Never entertain the thought, like Dr. Baljeet Singh said, that, oh, I'm a victim of this. No, once you take on a victim role, then you've suddenly handed over your power, your divine innate power, which the whole universe feeds into. You handed that over to somebody else, and then you're left with nothing. You're left impotent. But if you say, listen, this is a challenge, or this is an opportunity to grow, to really learn from the mistakes that I may have made, or to learn from creating more innovative approaches to overcome this particular barrier, and that really helps us. The one thing that really helps us is having this positive feeling of chardi kala. Of course, the important part is to have that faith deep within yourself that the Guru has placed within each one of us. The Guru, you see, many people are born in many different communities, and they spend a major portion of their adult life looking for a Guru. We are blessed that even from the moment we were conceived, we have a Guru who guides us, who shows us, who helps us. And at the end of the day, who revels in accomplishing through us. I'm constantly reminded of Guru Arjan Dev Ji Maharaj. What an amazing personality he was. Not only did he compile the entire Guru Granth Sahib Ji, the Adi Granth, but he also built the Harmandir Sahib. And at the end of it all, he says, Tera kita jato nahi, mainu jo kitoi, main nirgunyare ko gun nahi, ape taraspir. What extreme, like this, he handed it all, the glory is all handed it back to Vaheguru, to the divine within us. So, I may be going off on many different tangents, but I just want to bring it all this together in terms of what is that important ingredient in our lives. It is how much love, how much compassion we can share in every moment. At the end of the day, when we decide to give up this physical frame, when we're done with this ego or mind-body, complex that we have taken ourselves to be, at one point we'll have to drop all this behind. And at that point, it will not matter what awards you had won, how much wealth you accumulated, how many houses you had, cars, bank balance, you name it. Your possessions, positions, and perquisites is going to have no meaning at all. Nothing, zero, zilch. What is valuable, what is important in that moment in time is how much love did you share in every moment of now. that is what is going to be the most important ingredient in our life. And you may think, oh, love is very different from what the Western thing makes it out to be. Sort of love basically is taken in a very physical manner of sex, of lust, and people mix up love and lust. But our gurus have shown us incredibly wise ways of being able to share love. So let me talk a little bit about love. Deep down, we all know our heart refuses to accept that sexuality is the only purpose of love. It is not. There is a deeper, much more enduring meaning of love. And what is that meaning? People have talked about it. Guru Sahib, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, has most eloquently described the pain, the longing for the divine, and it is a unique form of yoga that is only present in the 6 scriptures. I would encourage, it's called Nirmal Yoga. Nirmal Yoga is where the Jiva Atma is the bride and the Paramatma is the bridegroom. And then this longing, deep pangs of love. So Walter Scott, he said, love rules the court, the camp, the grove, and men below and saints above. For love is heaven and heaven is love. But love is much more beyond that. Love is actually an ingredient in the creation of the cosmos. So you may ask, why is that? How do we know that? Because physics and astrophysics and spirituality have been at loggerheads about this as to how to solve this question of what brought about creation. Everybody talks about the Big Bang theory, and it's the hypothesis of the primeval atom, et cetera, to give this cosmological model. But it doesn't reveal what was before the Big Bang. So before, just as a very quick insight of this, and this is again present in Guru Granth Sahib. I'm not coming out with this in any original sort of way. Before the universe came into creation, there was no time, there was no space, there was no galaxy, no Milky Ways, no light or sound or any kind of matter. What was there was pure awareness, pure divine awareness. And this divine awareness wanted to know itself. So if it is the like Guru Sahib said, Ik Oankar, Ik Oankar, we say it 100 times every day. Many of us say it 100 times. But how do we understand what it is? It's not very well explained in many of the commentaries that I've come across. Ik meaning the one awareness, the one that beyond which there is nothing. That's just the Ik. Oankar, through Om, he became from Nirakar to Sakar. So that is what the Kar means. Om is what happened in between. So this divine awareness wanted to know itself. And so it created this primordial energy, which the Western people have called it Big Bang. But this was a limitless, like the divine himself, limitless energy. And what does energy do? It expands, it propels, And so this energy starts expanding. Before there was time or space or anything, this energy starts expanding. But what is the core nature of the divine? It is love. What does love do? It brings together, it attracts. And so between this propulsion and this attraction, and propulsion and attraction, there was a vibration that was created. And that vibration is Om. That Om has been, talked about in every religion. In the Bible, it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning, and all the word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. You know, so this has been talked about in the in the various Hindu scriptures as well. In the Nad Bin, the Upanishad, it says the sound principle of Om becomes manifest as Prakriti or nature, and various other. Even the Islamic texts talk about Amin. Amin is called the Sot-e-Sarmadi, the divine song, you know. And in the Quran, Prophet Muhammad says the 14 regions were made by the kalma being the Om, the primordial sound. So this vibration gets created, and this vibration is changeless. This vibration is continuous. So in this vibration, the divine inserted just the idea of change. In something that is changeless, he inserted the idea of change. And from that idea of change, time was born. And in this vibration, which is indivisible, he inserted just the concept of divisibility. And from that, space was born. So the one, the Om, the time, and the space, and then creation started. So really, it is a ingredient of our cosmic creation. But not only that, once creation was formed, it became the primal force in nature. You know, basically, how is it the primal force in nature? I'll ask you, what is nature made up of? It's made up of atoms and molecules, okay? And the atom has, you know, a nucleus with protons and neutrons, and there are these electrons rotating around it. But those protons are held very tightly in this very, very, very tiny space called the nucleus. What is holding that together? Because protons are similarly charged particles, they would easily just repel each other and fall apart. You know, every nucleus is being held together. That force that holds them together is actually love. And that is what, you know, is that attractive force of the universe. The universe is expanding. That has been proven after the Hubble telescope and so on. But what is it that holds this universe together? It is that love. And we see that in nature. We see that in nature all around us, because love expands, you know, like the universe. There is nothing is added from the outside. The change comes from within. Have you ever watched, you know, a flower blossom? It's blossoming from within. It is that love that expands to blossom that flower. That the leaf grows from within. You know, you can't stick anything onto it from, it is that love. So all forms of nature are meant to blossom and expand. Simply, you know, and those who don't believe in it, okay, did you ever see the laws that make a seed grow into a plant? You know, yet you don't know of that, but you have the faith that I'm planting this seed, it will grow and it will give me a harvest. The other thing is, love is selfless. Nature teaches us that constantly. Does any mango tree consume the mangoes? No, it's there. Does any river flow for itself? No, it's just for giving it away. Love is giving and forgiving. What is ego? What is self? It's getting and forgetting. You know, and so basically love is selfless, but love is also forgiving. You can damage nature as much as you want. In fact, so many environmentalists have found that, and this pertains to the question that came about the environmental degradation in Punjab. The moment you start loving the nature around you and taking care of it, it rebounds very, very rapidly. The land is there not to be exploited, but to be nurtured, to be cared for lovingly. And one of the most eloquent pieces that Dr. Jane Goodall wrote about, she said that when you visited Nagasaki, and after the atom bomb was dropped, it thought that everyone, the scientists, predicted that nothing is going to grow there for 30 years. Well, that's so wrong. That was so, once people came out and they started having the social interactions, and then everything changed. That whole environment, which was so toxic, became a vibrant environment. Let me give you an example. Did you know that the River Jordan supplies water to the Sea of Galilee? And it also supplies water to the Dead Sea. But when water comes into the Sea of Galilee, it flows out through that, and it creates a vibrant fauna and flora all around it, with communities and so on. Everyone benefits. When water comes into the Dead Sea, it doesn't flow out. It just stays there. Giving is what makes life happen, and makes, so I feel a loving, giving person will live in a generous and loving universe. A hostile person who considers themselves a victim will always live in a hostile world. So everyone that we meet is actually our own mirror. As a pediatrician, I've been in practice for 40 years. I've watched children, and that's the best part of my life, really, taking care of children. I work in the ICU. I'm an ICU physician, and children come critically ill at death's door, and they leave, smiling, sometimes skipping and hugging and giving us, all the love that no one can pay me enough to give up this job, because I get so much out of. So in this, there was actually a meet for handicapped children, and they were supposed to run this, 100-meter race. And 10 children start, and then the flag went down, and the children started running. One of the children fell down and scraped their knee and started crying. And the other 9 children turned around, they linked hands with this child, and they all walked to the finish line together. That's love. That is where, that is why love is actually the glue that holds family and community and society together. So, it is the basis for our character. When you have a loving thought, that thought is truth. When you have loving action, that action is righteousness, right conduct. When you have love as a feeling, it causes peace. When you have love as a deep understanding, it will lead to non-violence. You cannot hurt anyone, because that is what love. And so for the young people, I think there's a lot of confusion between what is love and what is lust. And perhaps, that needs to be, in love, every object, even a stone, becomes alive. The trees start speaking to you. All of creation flourishes in love. But any obsession which is devoid of love becomes lust. And even in lust, even a living being is a mere object for your pleasure. You want to use people like objects. And so there's a huge difference between the sky and the earth, that kind of a difference. Love focuses on the whole, on the oneness, the togetherness. Lust focuses on just the individual. Love brings about sacrifice, about accommodation for each other, compassion. Lust brings about violence, about aggression. In lust, you want to grab and you possess, but in love, you want to give, you want to surrender, you want to dissolve yourself and your needs. So what in a loving person will say, I'm here to give whatever you want. In lust, no, I'm here to take whatever I can get. So there is always this this mix-up, confusion between what is love and what is lust. Yes, the union between a male and a female is a celebration of the love, which is that deep sense of oneness, togetherness that they have achieved. And so, really, that is that should and is the basis of all our relationships. Like Dr. Baljit Singh, my wife and I, my wife's name is Itinder Kaur Anand, and she and I have enjoyed 37 years of marriage. We have 2 children. Our daughter is Amrit Kaur, and our son is Tej Pratap Singh. And they are, they're both in Sikhi. They're both very much connected to the Guru. And my wife and I still share an intimacy that we shared at the beginning of our relationship, because it was a relationship between equals. There was no hierarchy. There was no, me first. No, that's the key thing. In relationships, in true relationships, they're always between equals. There's always giving into the relationship. You never ever think about what can I get out of it. No, that's not the basis. That's transactional. That's a contract, a sauda that you're doing. It's not even a sacha sauda, it's a kacha sauda, according to what Guru Nanak Dev Ji say. And so, one has to be careful. You have to build those relationships, particularly the intimate ones. Taking an ego, or taking a stand, or being obsessed with your own selfish sort of needs is not going to work. Or taking someone for granted is not going to work. If you find imperfections in your life partner, that's the wrong place to look. The reason why you find that imperfection, it's in you. In someone who's so close to you, if you find any imperfections, the need to change them, no, that imperfection is in you, and you have to question yourself. What are my expectations? Why do I have these expectations? And these expectations are false. They're for getting rather than giving. So when 2 people work at giving into a relationship, it becomes so beautiful. It becomes, the ik atma do surata, what Guru Sahib had said in Gurbani. And every day we are very grateful. We don't grumble. We are grateful for having this opportunity to know ourselves better through the relationships that we have. So I'll stop at this point. I hope I didn't go too much outside the box, and happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Dr. Nand. I think I speak for everyone when I say that was very thought-provoking, and I think it was a very amazing talk. We actually do have a few questions. So the first one we have here is, so kind of how do you reconcile like children with health issues with, in your medical specialty, with your beliefs of love, vibration, and God seeing or allowing the suffering?
Yeah, it's a very, very important question. The key issue here is we are here in creation to enjoy the purpose for which we were created. Kot janam bhai keet patanga, kot janam gajmeen koranga, kot janam pankhi sarp hoyo, kot janam hever bikh joyo. Mil jagdish milan ki bariya, chirankal eh deh sanjariya. This is what Guru Nanak said, is that for yugas, for eons, we have gone through all different forms. And here we are. This is our chance to become divine, to merge with the divine. We have gone through the process of evolution, and now is our chance for involution, to come back to our original, pure being, pure consciousness. So when you see disease and suffering and so on, it is simply where that principle of oneness was usurped, that principle of oneness was disregarded. That is what creates the negative karma. And ultimately, the physical body is the counter on which all positive and negative transactions have to occur. So any karma that is done will have to be suffered through this same body. Any positive karma also has to be suffered through the same body. That's the karmic law is inexorable. It follows you lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And yes, what is my job here? My job here is to give love and compassion, to offer whatever professional services I can to help them heal, help them recover. And the soul that is deep within this child who is suffering will realize at some point that this is the karma that I had to work out through this body. And that allows me to carry on in a non-judgmental way. My role is here to simply share love. And it's amazing, when I'll just confess this. When I enter the ICU room, I first go and touch the feet of the child. And the nurses think I'm looking at tissue perfusion or, circulation and all that. No. I'm just offering myself as the instrument to in service to this form of the divine. And it's amazing that in caring deeply about the child and caring for them and about them, in this process, at some point, the patient and the doctor both disappear. Simply love remains. The child is sharing love and I'm sharing love. And we're both in this blissful, joyful moment together because creation had meant for it to happen. Yes, there may be karmic balances that have manifested in this disease, and with God's grace, this child will make it and will have paid the dues, through whatever is to happen.
Thank you for that answer. I think another question we have here is kind of what has working with children taught you about kind of the hope for humanity in the face of resource competition and a growing population?
Yeah. So that is truly so. The purpose of whatever is happening in this creation, which is an illusory, it's a total illusion. It's simply based on our senses, and each of our senses is so limited. We are the limitless. We are the innate. We were always divine. We can never not be divine. We always will be divine. But we are in this finite, limited body where the eyes can see one octave of light. They cannot see the 50 other octaves of light. The ears can only hear between a certain range of frequencies. They cannot hear the subsonic and ultrasonic frequencies. The tongue can only taste something that's placed on it. The skin can only sense something that is, directly impacting it. And the nose can only smell, what is just within our vicinity. So on the basis of these five senses, we are putting this psychological structure together. But truly, the Atma is the same as the Paramatma. And so whatever is happening in creation is simply a reflection of who collectively who we are as humanity. I have great hope for humanity. I think the age of competition and conflict, is coming to an end. More and more people are realizing that giving is far more worthwhile than receiving. More and more people are realizing that cooperation is far more meaningful than competition. More and more people are realizing that the pie will always grow. Even today, we have, even with the environmental degradation, we have enough resources to feed and support, twice the world's population. But it is this thought, this attitude of scarcity, I better grab onto this, I better grab onto that, that is what is creating the lack of water and soil and air pollution and all of those things, the degradation, the climate change, degradation of nature, because we have forgotten our sense of abundance. When you come from a mentality of scarcity, then you want to hoard things. You want to grab onto just in case you'll need it. You may never need it. But you may have 100 shirts in your closet, but because you have 100 shirts in your closet, there are 99 people out there who don't have a shirt, and that's the mentality we need to get over.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anand. I think, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you so much for that answer and for your talk. I think it was really inspirational and thought-provoking. I do see we have a lot more questions kind of coming, but I think as we have 2 more speakers to do today, I think we're going to have to move forward, but it was a very great kind of having you here today.
Thank you. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I will now hand it back to Snehpal.
Yes, and thank you so much again for your talk. Our next speaker is Dr. Harjeet Grewal. And Dr. Grewal is a professor in the Religious Studies Department at the University of Calgary and was actually an instrumental force in the creation of Canada's first Sikh studies program at the University of Calgary. Dr. Grewal's background is in molecular genetics and Asian studies, and his research is grounded in creating novel approaches to Sikh literature and philosophy by applying these to current humanitarian questions. And with that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Grewal.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to be presenting here today. I think this is an amazing way to cap off another successful Sikh Heritage Month in Canada. I'd like to thank the coordinating team, especially Hartegh Singh, who took out some time prior to this discussion to just kind of fill me in with the details and background for how the Ottawa community approaches its Sikh Heritage Month activities. Although there are always challenges in organizing these types of events and continuing them along the way, I was happy to learn from Hartegh that this is a fully youth-run endeavor, one which provides an opportunity for developing leadership skills that I hope many of you will carry forward into your respective careers as members of the global Sikh community. So this is kind of an important opportunity, I think, to build capacity within the community. And in doing so, I also wanted to kind of thank my esteemed co-panelists for their reflections and insights. You're all such an inspiration, and I'm truly honored to listen and learn from what you all have to say. Lastly, thanks to our audience members to having taken out time from your busy lives to attend and participate in the conversation. I'll be reflecting on my journey into academia and some of my motivations as a scholar of Sikh studies from a personal and community-oriented perspective, and kind of reflecting on what I kind of think is a good model for this type of scholarship, a kind of public-facing, engaged scholarship that is concerned about not just the Sikh community, but the communities within which Sikhs live. And speaking about that, I think, and connecting to what Dr. Anand was saying was, kind of how we can capitalize on the love that we gain from learning about Gurbani and use it in our respective spheres and benefit all of humanity. So I'll endeavor to discuss things in brevity so that we may have more time to discuss, as I think that we benefit most from dialogic learning. So I encourage everyone to ask questions using the chat function as we progress. And please, if Hartik and Snepal, you can keep an eye on that as you have been. I'm not so good as looking at both the chat and carrying on my talk. So please flag that as we go. And if somebody does want to have a question in between, as I'm going ahead, just as Dr. Baljeet Singh had said, feel free, both of you, to interject and have that question asked. So Edmonton's Sikh community is currently dealing with an untimely and tragic loss of a teenager named Karanveer Singh Sahota. Edmonton is where me and my family currently live, although I do teach in Calgary, and I benefit from actually living in both of these cities in different capacities. He was attacked by a group of 7 teens, 6 males and 1 female, at the bus stop outside of his high school, McNally Composite. I do not know Karanveer or his family, but he went to the same school I graduated from in 1996. So although we are separated by 26 years, it seems to me that Karanveer and I also share our belonging to a community that has shouldered periodic cycles of violence, both nationally and internationally for centuries. Like many people in Edmonton, I've been reflecting on this tragedy over the last few weeks. So when the Ottawa Sikh Heritage Month organizers approached me about participating in this panel, I naturally kind of wanted to use this opportunity to think about my own experiences, but connect it with what I think are problems that are still ongoing and challenges, but also opportunities that we can kind of align if we think about collectively on these experiences and try to grow into ways of addressing these things and speaking about them and kind of sharing, as I'm kind of trying to encourage everyone to do, about what these things mean to us. So as we have heard from our illustrious panelists, challenges are in essence opportunities for learning and growing as well. We still share in many ways the commonality of our challenges and opportunities in this community. And so thinking about them together with you guys today, I want to kind of carry Karanveer and what his loss represents as I kind of reflect and meditate upon my own experiences in terms of being a young person and trying to overcome things that we face here as members of the diaspora, children born away from Punjab, let's say, and kind of think about that together with you guys here. So to begin with, I want to recognize that self-reflection is actually a beneficial human tool, not simply for self-cultivation, but for community development and growth. While it may be tempting to think about self-cultivation as something that increases our attachment and possession of ourselves or our home, I think that we have a more complicated understanding of home provided to us in Asa Ki Baar, in Mahalla Duja's Bani, where it states, Home eho hukum hai, pe kirt firaye, home tirag rog hai, daru piyas mae, kirpa kare je apani, gurka shabd kamaye, nanak kahe suno jano, et sanjam dukh jaye. So I take this optimistically to mean that our attachment to ourselves is neither predestined to be wholly negative or wholly positive. The experience of home is derived from hukum. As such, it is how we are hardwired, if you will, and can help us attain knowledge of truth through which we perpetuate truthful actions. So in a way, it's central to how we exist in this world, and it can actually be beneficial or harmful. It depends on what we know and what we do with that knowledge. This happens, kind of truthful action happens if we change what we do with home by directing it toward the accrual of Shabad, the meanings within or understandings of Gurbani. Using home as a tool for this pursuit allows us to dissipate the layers of pain, sorrow, or guilt that we can otherwise carry in our consciousness because of home. I mention this kind of to begin with in order to clarify my intention and the structure of my reflection in being less about me per se and more about discussing the journey toward engaging meaningfully with the treasures that are within Gurbani. In Mahalla Noma's shloks, we read, Nar chahet kuch aur ki aure pai, chitvat raho tagore, nanak phasi gal pari. This shlok begins my meditation on how to overcome adversity because it states that we often desire one thing, something else happens, whose impact, again, are altogether different. Nanak, by focusing our thoughts on duplicity, we wear a noose around our necks. Taking this as something to reflect on, how then can we align our aspirations with real impact? Mahalla Pella's Bani gives us one clue. It states, Jinni Satya Vanijaya Guru Pure Sabas, Nanaka Vast Pachanasi, Satya Sauda Jisapas. So it actually is talking about such Sauda, which Dr. Anand was just mentioning. Those who barter in the truth, the light of Gur is with them. Nanak, those who bargain in truth are able to recognize things. And that I take to kind of mean recognize things as they are, rather than recognizing things as sometimes we perceive them to be. And again, what Dr. Anand was saying, perhaps just through our sense faculties, rather than as they truly are in the world itself as such. Mahalla Pella's Bani tells us that this world is a dream where we are at play in every instance of our lives, and that we reap based on the extent of the good we can do or the positive impact we have on other living beings. So my family moved to Edmonton, Alberta in the 1980s, just before the province entered into another bust cycle in its oil economy. I was a year or two shy of starting kindergarten when we arrived. When I think about my experience in public school today, I think about perpetual bullying, systemic racism, and structural violence. Memories of fear and eventually revulsion at a system that not only excluded me and exposed me to regular violence from my peers, but also created a desire to tread carefully to make it through each day somehow or another. Regularly being beaten by groups of young boys during recess time, while being cursed at and demeaned as an outsider wasn't enough. It was the accusations by teachers, volunteers, and administrators like principals, vice principals, and counselors that I had somehow brought the beatings upon myself, or that I was a troublemaker and therefore deserved what I got that would continue to confound me as I progressed through school. I was fortunate enough to be able to say that while this deeply impacted my attitude about learning in society, and the society I lived in, my grades were not so severely impacted that I was ever impeded from progressing. So I think I was fortunate in that way that I was still able to do well despite these other things I was facing. So although today I believe very strongly that had circumstances been different, I nonetheless would have done even better and would have excelled more in learning than what I was able to do. So I do kind of think about it as a kind of double-edged sword in that regard. Be that as it may, by the time I was in junior high school, which at that time in Edmonton included the grades from 7 to 9, many of the young brown and other BIPOC boys who had become kind of aggregated or collected into these schools from different elementary schools, many who had had the same or similar experiences that I had were now in a position numerically to potentially stave off the constant taunting and aggression from white or Caucasian boys. Many learned to react violently in small groups as a reaction to the systemic violence they were exposed to. I can still vividly recall the time when a young sick boy's older cousin brought a clique of high school boys to our junior high school to threaten a bunch of white boys who had been trying to bully us, as they had done in elementary school. We all grouped together at one of the side entrances of the school after class that day to discuss what had transpired. And I think the feeling of empowerment and of being protected, a sense of being protected, was kind of quite palpable that day, not just amongst, in all the boys. I felt it as well, but I think everybody was kind of feeling that. So of course, the seduction of this type of empowerment was not without its deleterious impacts. It came with attempts to meet violence with further violence, but also sojourns of individual boys or groups into petty crime and substance abuse. There were numerous occasions where we would sit together and talk about the occurrence of regular fights between young Desi men and white youth, where the Desis used cricket bats and field hockey sticks in late night street battles. There was a twisted feeling of pride amongst some of my peers that the white kids had been beaten by implements that were ours. Cricket and field hockey kind of representing Punjabi or Desi kind of sports, as though fights where ice hockey sticks were the implements of pain somehow wouldn't have aroused the same sense of awe amongst us. I watched all this quite closely and in some ways participated from the margins, however. I was never seriously involved and always found that I was held back from these reactive kinds of violence. As I think back on it now, I'm reminded of a shabad, Mere hiare ratan naam harbasya, gurhat tareo mere mata, which roughly means that the jewel of name is placed within my heart. The light of truth has placed its protectiveness upon my forehead in order to guide me. So I do Simran to this Shabad quite often now. And over the last few years, I'm reminded that this type of protection is something that we can benefit from and guides us to not simply kind of engage in these types of anger, kind of forms of aggression and kind of reactive types of violence. When I entered high school at McNally, the situation was like a perfect storm developing within the community. Not only were Sikh and Punjabi young men moving along the routes of criminalization and racialization as per the institutional design of Canadian settler colonial formations of multiculturalism, but they were being provoked at times by elders within the community who had experienced their own forms of institutional discrimination and struggled as low-wage earners, often because of racist hiring practices. I remember doing a summer job at an oil pipeline company, being told by an elder that we must all work 3 or 4 times harder in whatever position we can attain in this country. He told me to be resilient, be tough, and develop a work ethic so that I can excel and break glass ceilings wherever I go. I do not think everyone got the same message as I did, however, because I heard stories from other young men actually being encouraged to engage in violence. Thinking back to the cycles of violence that I had witnessed throughout high school is what makes me think about Karan Beer and the youth in our community. Since returning to Alberta, I've been saddened to hear that young children in elementary school are still being called Paki, as well as being called terrorists, being told to go back to their country, along with other slurs and such. They were, just as I was threatened by white children, they also experienced this threat and violence. And again, just as I had experienced, I hear from young children in the Gurdwara where I teach Punjabi that it's the older boys, the older Punjabi boys, who often come and defend the younger siblings, etc., and do so by kind of, again, coming together and threatening the other crowds with violence. And the ultimate price, unfortunately, is paid by some of our youth as they wind up in intra-group violence, where we wind up fighting amongst one another as Sikhs, as Punjabis, or as BIPOC groups. Our battles with one another, promulgated as they often are by external societal pressures, makes me think about what James Baldwin once said in his book, Notes of a Native Son. And I quote, "To smash something is the ghetto's chronic need. Most of the time, it is the members of the ghetto who smash each other and themselves. But as long as the ghetto walls are standing, there will always come a moment when these outlets do not work." So perhaps it is time for us in the Sikh community to find alternative routes to our frustrations and to think about where and how these walls exist and how they actually perpetuate these forms of violence, and they make us work to be violent or visit violence upon one another. in ways that are destructive. So how do I respond to this situation? What did I do to persevere or to overcome the challenges that society put before me? I somewhat reflexively, as I'm doing in this piece that I'm giving here, turn to Gursiki, to our languages and our knowledge systems, and the practices that are found within these. I found a point of view that directed me towards aiming to benefit all of humanity through researching and sharing all the resources that exist within our tradition. As things progressed and the violence got worse in the community, I had a deeply moving moment where I was overwhelmed with the concern that those of us who are born in migrant families abroad in diasporas risk never having access to our languages, our worldviews, and philosophies because of the systematic structures, such as the schools, ironically, that deny us opportunities to embrace and engage with these things. Clearly, I would not have phrased it that way back then, but nonetheless, the deleterious impacts of cultural, religious, and linguistic loss have been empirically shown amongst other colonized communities, such as First Nation tribes across North America, as they struggle to also recover and reconcile with the deep and deleterious impacts they faced from the kind of structural violence that's been visited upon those groups. Academia became my chosen route to pursue recovering and re-engaging some of these lost treasures, as I felt that it was the best way to eventually be able to give back some of that learning to the community and to all of humanity. Having finished my PhD in 2017, I've been fortunate enough to return to Alberta and teach about Gursiki at the University of Calgary. These courses have created interest among students and the Sikh community to try to create a Sikh research chair, as was mentioned by Snehpal. And this was a kind of focus in the community and a focus among the students. And interesting, I think the concern here amongst these groups, these vested groups, was to actually be able to use the institutions where we do face challenges and actually make them into places where opportunities come, a place where we can share Sikh thought and traditions within the community and with the world. So I feel fortunate to be able to play some small role in helping establish something here in Canada that has the potential to give back to this country for many generations, but also again to the global kind of humanistic world within which we live, and potentially play a role in how we learn to love and care for one another, as Dr. Anand was mentioning. Across all the challenges that I've faced, I should say that I was always able to turn to Gurbani and find a source of succor and sustenance. There may have been times when I was younger, and even times now where I don't fully understand the portent of these verses, but the ability to engage and learn with them and learn alongside reading and reciting them has always been beneficial to me. It's been a light that has nourished my mind, removed that darkness of the past events I carry with me, and prepares me for receiving knowledge. Much as we read in Mahalla Ticha's Bani, Gurban Gyana na hovai sukh vasai mana, na sukh vasai mana aaye, sorry. Which to me, in this moment, means that without the light of oneness, that there can be no wisdom and no true joy. These things cannot penetrate or grow within our consciousness. Finding the true value of knowledge, or gyan, begins by removing the darkness within our consciousness through the light of oneness. And as Gursikhs, we are told this happens through practicing Nam Simran and engaging in Sangat with attained individuals. And I think that's something I like to remind myself and people I have the opportunity to engage with, is that while we should engage and definitely try to do good things, that the good begins for Sikhs or us as Gursikhs with Gurbani, with Nam Simran, and with Sangat. And those are important to not forget. We not only need Nam in order to attain this light, but also Sangat, as Bhagat Kabir Ji's Bani states, Chod Bikya Ras It Sangat Necho Marna, Ramiye Japo Prani, Anant Jivan Bani, Inabida Bhavasagar Tarna, which means let go of the impacts of past pains. There's nothing but death in their Sangat. So if we just think about our pains and we attach ourselves to them, nothing good will come of that. We'll only die kind of with those pains or through those pains. Another life awaits you through Nam Simran of Bani. It is a way to successfully traverse the ocean of this material world. Whenever I face challenges, I have found that having recourse to Bani, the ability to read and engage it, to whatever limited capacity I have, has always helped me persevere. And I just want to kind of encourage everybody to try to learn and benefit from these things so that we can stay connected to the treasures that we have. Thank you, and I look forward to everyone's questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kariwala. I think I speak for everyone when I say that's it's a very thought-provoking story that you've told us, and it's something that's very much worth reflecting on for the entire community. And I did have a question for you myself, actually, and it's in light of hearing the heartbreaking story of Karanveer, who unfortunately passed away, and I wanted to ask you how we as a community can kind of move forward from situations such as that, and how we can work to break the cycle of violence that our community or other communities may find themselves in, in light of the words of Gurbani and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the question, Snehpal. This is top of mind, so to speak, in a lot of ways for me. I think that, at the community level, I think trying to find ways to have us engage deeply with Gurbani and the practices that are associated with Gurbani and that are taught through Gurbani at a very young age. And I think there's substantial challenges. So I teach in the Gurdwara. I'm researching and advocating for curriculum in public schools as well as private schools. And I think that there's significant challenges there in terms of how we get past the idea as a community that it's enough to have some parts of Bani memorized. And I don't mean to take away from the importance of that. I believe in the importance of that as well. But the applicability of Gurbani and the kind of idea that we can act in our lives seamlessly through this knowledge, and that this knowledge is wed to our actions, requires something deeper than memorization. And so in that one way, I think one way to approach this is to think about the coming generations and making sure that they have a vigorous kind of curriculum that they can learn and embrace these things, and finding routes across different institutions that we live in order to make that happen. So whether it be public school, obviously the Gurdwaras are essential to this, and the different types of private schools or private small businesses, kind of linking with them and trying to find ways to come up with creative tools and stuff to get people engaged from a young age and excited about the beautiful tradition that we have. And on the other side of it, though, and I think this is what I was gesturing towards in what I was saying, there's a whole bunch of people who are stuck in this kind of reactive mode of either even just microaggressions, if not aggressive violence, right? And some of that is carried by these kind of slights and insults, or the kind of discriminations that we face I mean, I even remember hearing, being in the Gurdwara and hearing some of the Buzurgs talking about, the difficulties they had as cab drivers and things like that, right? And so these are things that they remember and they pass on, right? And that's frustrating for them, and often doesn't get communicated in every way. So finding ways to talk about these things. So I think thinking about reconciliation as a way to kind of talk about the pain and suffering and traumas that we have in the community, I think is another good and solid route. And another important aspect, and I think, so again, just to kind of pedal back for a second, I think public scholarship and engaged public scholarship, having these spaces and discussing it with youth, discussing it with the community, finding new ways to use the Gurdwara space, bringing back dialogics into the Gurdwara space in order to do these things is vitally important. And then the other thing I was going to mention is that, we have to recognize, there's something I came across in doing my research for my dissertation. It's always stuck with me, is that there was a moment where it's written in John Malcolm's Sketch of the Six. He describes meeting Nanak Panthi Gyani in Calcutta, and one of the things that the Gyani tells Malcolm is that the British are barbarians and they have a terrible understanding of justice. And that's always stuck with me, because it's always made me wonder, well, what was his understanding of justice? What was this Gyani's understanding of justice, and what was so reprehensible to him or what was so bad about the way that the British were this kind of punitive form of justice, right? And so I think when we don't really have any sick chaplains in the prison systems. We don't have any kind of research in psychology, social work, other forms of counseling where we can teach students and upcoming professionals to engage with youth who do wind up getting criminalized about themselves or different ways of understanding justice and remediate them through our own cultural forms. And so there's nothing really in terms of those tools. And again, I think if we look to other groups that face similar challenges as a community, I think there's a kind of, again, a reawakening, if you will, as Dr. Nand was saying, kind of burgeoning of a greater sense of love and greater capacity of sharing rather than punishing one another. And so I think tools need to be made. And again, I think, ironically, these settler colonial institutions we have can help us in doing that. It's just a matter of, again, having the grace and the fortitude to work with people and to bring people along with you. So I kind of see a future where we're developing these things and kind of, by recognizing the challenges that exist, rather than objectifying ourselves and as knowledge systems have done in the past. And also, while it's important to celebrate our history, rather than just celebrating ourselves, to find that middle path and work towards, again, benefiting, somebody much wiser than I am once told me, first you have to make sure you're fed, right? If you want to benefit somebody else, then you need to take care of, as Dr. Nand and Dr. Baljeet Singh were saying, you need to take care of your spouse, your partner, and you need to take care of your children. And then you need to take care of your family. And after that, you can think about community and humanity, etc. So I think carrying that with us and working that middle path so that we can extend those benefits to community and to humanity is going to be important going forward. So that's something I take, and try to really push for in terms of what you were saying. So I hope that helps answer your question.
It does, absolutely. Thank you so much for your answer to that question. I think it's something that all of us can reflect on, and it's something that we can all learn a little bit about moving forward, as a community. And unfortunately, we don't have much time for more questions, but I wanted to let you know that everybody here on the Security Month team, we really appreciate you coming out to talk about your experiences and to give us all something that we can learn moving forward, especially based so much in Gurbani.
Perfect.
Right.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Grewal. It was a really insightful conversation. And finally, we're going to progress on to our fourth and final guest speaker, who is Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Kamal Singh Khalsi. Lieutenant Colonel Khalsi is a graduate from the Truro University College of Osteopathic Medicine and is trained in EMS and disaster medicine. He joined the U.S. Army in 2001 and has been serving for over 20 years. In 2009, he became the first Sikh to be granted religious accommodation in the military in nearly a generation. His policy efforts have opened the door and paved the way for countless soldiers to be able to serve with their religiously mandated turbans, beards, hijabs, and yarmulkes. Lieutenant Colonel Khalsi was deployed to Afghanistan in 2011 in support of Operation Enduring Freedom and has treated hundreds of combat casualties and was awarded a Bronze Star Medal for his service. In his spare time, he advocates for civil liberties with regards to religious freedom, and he has founded a military veterans nonprofit called the Sikh American Veterans Alliance in order to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the military. With that, please welcome Lieutenant Colonel Kamal Khalsi.
Thank you, Hardik, and thank you to my esteemed fellow panelists, and really happy to join our friends across the border today here in celebration of Sikh Heritage Month. Here in the U.S., we started this tradition many years ago at the Pentagon. We would celebrate Vaisakhi every year, even though there were only a handful of us in the U.S. Military at the time. I think so. I joined the military way back in 2001, but when I got in, I was the first to get the accommodation for the Star and for Dari. And then now we have over 100 Sardars, Kesatari, in the Army and the Air Force. But we would have maybe 20 people, if that, 26, show up at these Pentagon Vaisakhi celebrations. But what it allowed us to do inside the Pentagon, in those very thick walls of the Pentagon, was allowed us to showcase and celebrate who the Sikh community is. It allowed us to connect with people inside those corridors and take away some of the fear. There is where there is misunderstanding, there is great fear. So what we found was a lot of people, and a lot of the regular, the majority of Pentagon brass, the people of the upper echelons of power there, are white males, right? And it's not surprising. Most of them don't know who we are, where we come from, what we represent, and even those that do know that we are Sikhs, they don't really know what Sikhism stands for. They don't know our wonderful military history, that we fought the Mughals, that we actually fought the British, that we were actually we played a very large role in the world wars, and without our help, they may not have turned the tide in the world wars. So they don't. We need to be in those walls to be able to explain to them who we are and what we do, what we represent. But as the years went on, we celebrated Vaisakhi. I think during the later stages of the Obama administration, as the Trump administration came into power, they stopped celebrating Vaisakhi. And I realize I'm talking to you guys mostly in Canada. Maybe we have some other listeners here from the US, but you guys are easily a generation ahead of us in all of this. But I just wanted to highlight some of our struggles here. As the Trump administration came in, the Pentagon's chaplain the chaplain is supposed to be a chaplain to all, not just to Christians, not just to their own religious persuasion. So the Pentagon chaplain said, look, you guys don't have any Sikhs here serving at the Pentagon, so technically we're not allowed to host your Vaisakhi event anymore. And that was deeply offsetting. It was very troubling to have a Christian chaplain come to me and say that we are not going to celebrate your religious tradition, where we've been doing that for the past 4 or 5 years under the Obama administration. So we've continued to fight, and it's not been an easy journey. When I got my accommodation in 2009, it took me a year and a half to fight for that. When everybody that we approached said, look, this is not a fight that you can win. I didn't care. I didn't care if I fought and lost, but it mattered to me that I stood up for myself, that I stood up for my faith. It mattered to me that I stood up for something that I believed in, because that's what I want my kids to do, and I want my kids to see that I fought for something, and that I stand for something. So we took up this massive fight way back in 2009, and after about a year and a half, we basically wore them down, and went through a mountain of paperwork, and with the help of Sikh Coalition, SALDEF at the time, United Sikhs, World Sikh Organization helped out as well. It was a massive effort by the community, as well as ACLU over the years, to just get myself, Captain Ratan at the time, and Corporal Lamba, so just the three of us. And then it took us another 8 years to change policy in the military. So during that time, during the time or the process where they were thinking about whether or not to allow me into the military, one of the Pentagon officials came to me and said, look, I was a captain at the time. He said, Captain Gulsi, what if you have to wear a helmet? What are you going to do? And I said, this is not complicated. I can wear a patka, and actually, my pug is really not all that big. If you give me a large enough helmet, I can probably fit a helmet over my pug anyway. So he's like, okay, helmet's fine. He's like, what about the gas mask? And so part of my background is in EMS and disaster medicine. I actually trained with the IDF in Israel with a lot of their disaster experts. So we routinely wore gas masks, and I had to make sure that I got a good fit. So I knew that a little bit of Vaseline along the edges helped make a very, very good fit. So I said, look, I am sure that I can wear the gas mask and get a good seal. Certainly they didn't just take my word for it. They put me through the tests. I went through the gas chamber test to make sure that I had a good seal. So we got that taken care of. And then the last question he asked me was, look, what if you're on what if the mission demands that you cut your hair and remove your turban? Then what do you do? And I thought for a second there, and I said, look, if I have to bleed for my country, I am happy to do that. You can take my arm, you can take my leg, but I can't give you that which does not belong to me. My turban, my case, my hair, my beard, that belongs to my guru, and it's not mine to give. So I said, respectfully, I'm happy to bleed and die for my country, but I can't give you my turban or my hair. And I think at that point they were satisfied, or perhaps they thought, this guy's crazy. He's not going to go away. We might as well let him in. And so they allowed me to they gave me a temporary religious accommodation for my distar and for my dari in my case. And then from there we worked very hard for the next 8 years to change policy just in the army. And then it took us a few more years and we got the Air Force on board as well. But I don't know if you guys have been following the news at all here in the US, but we're in the process of suing the Navy and the Marines to get this accommodation for the recruits, Sikh recruits, and other religious minority recruits in those services. So we still can't serve freely here in the U.S. We're still fighting the fight. But I think what is important in all this is early on, everybody and their mother was convinced that we would lose this fight to the U.S. military, and I understand that. The U.S. military, it is the largest employer, one of the largest employers in the United States. It is one of the oldest and most revered institutions in the U.S. So it was definitely a Samson Goliath moment. But I think when you have somebody that is, or a group that is passionate about what they believe in, and they're willing to sacrifice everything for their beliefs and what they stand for, much like what Ukraine is doing with Russia right now. Like, who would have imagined, like a month and a half ago, that Ukraine would actually be winning? Given that they're not even top 10 militaries in the world. But I think it's important to acknowledge that when you have somebody that is truly passionate about what they're fighting for, you cannot defeat a person like that, or you cannot defeat an adversary like that. So, when I think about what our gurus had accomplished, what Guru Gobind Singh Ji had accomplished, fighting against the Mughals, they had the conviction of their beliefs, even when they had nothing else. And that, when I deployed to Afghanistan, when I was up against insurmountable odds in any portion of my life, that's what I think about, and it's no secret, but a lot of folks know that I was diagnosed with metastatic cancer last year. So it's been a very, very hard year. It's been a difficult fight, but I look to what our gurus have accomplished, and I look to our faith for strength. I look to my family for strength and support, and my kids, and it makes everything okay, So all this, with a foot in the grave, it changes your perspective on life. It definitely feels like I walk around with a sword above my head each day. But there's grace in that as well, and I find that I'm connected to something bigger than myself. So I know that was a lot in a very short time, but let's move to questions. That's my favorite part of this.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Khalsi. I think that was a very touching discussion, and I think we're really happy that you were able to take the time out of your busy day to be here with us today. I think the question I kind of have is so what was kind of like the driving force behind you not giving up when everyone was telling you that this was impossible? Like what kept you pushing and going forward? Because it definitely is a hard time when everyone's telling you it's not possible, it's not possible. But you still kept that motivation and drive going.
Yeah, you really just need one person in your corner. And for me, that one person is my wife. Chinar has been, I joke, it was actually our anniversary just a few weeks ago, and I joke, it's our running joke that she's my favorite wife. And on social media, I had these English majors telling me, like, look, semantics and grammar, you're implying that you have other wives. I don't have other wives. I was just making a joke. So to all those people out there, but she's been amazing, and I think if you have that one person that is there by your side, they make a world of difference. And so I guess my life story will be that I had her in my corner supporting me on all these crazy missions, and all these wonderful adventures that we've had together.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good answer. I guess another question, kind of in the similar vein, is kind of in times when you've been deployed for the army and you're kind of in these kind of risky and dangerous situations, kind of how do you kind of maintain kind of your calm and your courage, and kind of how do you get through those situations?
Well, it's similar to being in the situation I'm in now with having cancer. What's going to happen is going to happen. Like I sort of have understood that there's actually very little that I can do, that I have very little control in any of this. So when it's my time, it's my time. And if that's on the battlefield, then I'll be very happy to die on the battlefield. And if it's here, then so be it. But I think understanding that, like Virji said before me, that this is a play. We're just here dancing the dance. So I feel that I am doing everything in my power. We do have choices, so I'm pursuing all the treatment that I can, but at the end of the day, the guru is going to decide what happens to me, and if that means that I'm needed on this plane of existence, then that's great. I'd love to have more time with my wife and kids. And if it means that I'm needed elsewhere, then I accept that. That's part of life. It's part of Hukum.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think we have a question. It's about two parts. So I'll split it up into two separate ones when I ask you.
Sure.
So the first part would be kind of what do you have in terms of tips for other people when it comes to kind of facing challenges and persevering and getting through obstacles?
I think that's a great question. You have to have discipline, and if you don't have discipline in life, it is hard to get anything done. So discipline comes in many forms. You have to have physical discipline. So I always find it. And I hope I don't offend anybody. If I do, I apologize. I don't mean to offend. But like I find it really funny when all these people like Gyanis and Ragis that are like probably 100 pounds overweight talk to us about discipline and Gurdra, because I think physical discipline is also super important, just as spiritual discipline. And so I mean, discipline needs to come mind, body, spirit. You if you understand or acknowledge the fact that Sikhs are here to learn, that this is a school for us. We need to sharpen our minds. We have to have discipline of thought and of education. We all need to be educated. We need to have discipline of spirit. We need to have a clean heart. We need to be mindful of what the gurus have told us and taught us. We need to be mindful of Gurbani and learn to uplift not just our own spirits, but other people's spirits. And so I do a lot of this through service. And so we are, for example, somebody asked me, can we help the people in Ukraine? So we decided to put money together to deliver food. So we've actually pushed over 2 tons of food to Ukraine already, even though it's not part of our Sikh military nonprofit's mission. It's not to provide money, food or money to Ukraine, but spiritually, it's the right thing to do right now. So we try to help through service, and we try to push back against hate and ignorance and discrimination through service. But all of that requires discipline.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. I think discipline, like you mentioned, is quite important throughout your life. I think the other part of this question was, so like you mentioned, like your partner is quite important to you kind of in your life and kind of really key part of when you're showing courage and getting through obstacles. Kind of what else would you kind of say is also another important aspect other than your partner in that similar sense?
I think it's important to find something that you're passionate about and pursue it. Don't get through life by just waking up and going through the motions. I think that's a very sad life. Find something that excites you, that gets you up out of bed every morning. And I know some people that may be, military service. For some people that may be, computer science or medicine or something else, but find something that you are passionate about. I think that is probably the most important advice that I could give anybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khalsi, for taking the time out and speaking with us today. We really appreciate that. It was a really touching talk, and I think we all kind of came away from it more inspired than we were before. Thank you so much.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for what you're doing.
All right. And with that, Tegh Talks 2022 must come to a close. I want to thank all of our speakers who took the time out of their busy schedules to come and speak today. We could not have held this year's virtual Tegh Talks without them. And I hope that their stories can be an inspiration to Sikh youth everywhere. I know for myself, this was truly a very touching and inspirational Tegh Talks. And I'd also like to thank the lovely audience who helped to make sure we captured the spirit of Tegh Talks, even while they were held virtually. You can rewatch this year's Tegh Talks as well as previous year's Tegh Talks speakers on our YouTube channel, SHM Ottawa. And again, I want to thank everyone so much. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.